Over the past few weeks, we've been taking a close look at the way that elements of film form are used in movies to provide story information, to provide subjective narration, to communicate implicit meaning, and for artistic or aesthetic purposes. This week, we're going to turn our attention to the way that movie editing is used to do all of these things. When it comes to the stylistic elements of film form, mise-en-scène and cinematography provide story information, provide subjective narration, communicate thematic meanings, and contribute to a movie's visual aesthetic within images. As we've seen, they do this through the composition, staging, and framing of shots, as well as the specific filming techniques that are used to record those shots. In contrast, editing does all these same things: provide story information, provide subjective narration, communicate thematic meaning, and contribute to a movie's overall visual aesthetic. But it does this in the interaction between images, through the order in which images are juxtaposed or joined together, as well as through the specific editing techniques that are used to transition from one image to the next, as well as from one scene to the next. In the editing process, shots are selected from all of the various takes recorded during filming, and then assembled into scenes. Scenes are then assembled into the movie as a whole. Assembly in this context includes all of the decisions that the editor and the director make about the order in which both shots and scenes are arranged, which partly depends on the temporal order, chronological or non-chronological, that is used in the script. It also includes decisions about which of the editing techniques discussed in the reading for this week will be used to transition between them. And, as with production design and cinematography, these decisions are motivated by practical, symbolic, and artistic considerations all at the same time. So in other words, there's a specific reason for every edit that we see in a movie, both in terms of when the edit occurs and what type of edit is used. Before the late 1970s, when digital editing software was first introduced, all film editing was done manually, by physically cutting and pasting strips of film together. Today, professional film editing is done digitally, even in the case of movies that are shot on analog film. In those cases, the raw footage is scanned in, edited on computers, and then printed back onto film for the release prints that are going to theaters with analog projectors. However, while the technical process for editing films may have changed, the logic behind how movies are edited has not. This logic is based on a series of movie editing principles known collectively as the Kuleshov effect, which forms the conceptual framework for both the practical, the symbolic, and the artistic decisions behind how movies are edited. The Kuleshov effect is named after Russian movie director Lev Kuleshov, who is one of the filmmakers responsible for developing this theory of how movie editing works. In 1921, Kuleshov, who was also an instructor at the Russian Film School, ran a series of experiments along with his students, many of whom went on to become major figures in Russian cinema in the 1920s and 1930s. The purpose of these experiments was to try to figure out the cognitive processes through which audiences make sense of movie images. More specifically, the members of the Kuleshov workshop were interested in trying to figure out how movie editing shapes audience perception of movie content, both in terms of how editing helps us to understand or make sense of the movie's story, and in terms of how editing impacts the way that we interpret symbolic meaning from movie images. In their first experiment, the filmmakers at the Kuleshov workshop took a shot of an actor looking directly at the camera with a neutral expression on his face. Then they edited that shot together with different images of different content, followed by a cut back to the first shot of the man looking into the camera. They did this to see what kind of impact replacing the second shot in this sequence of images would have on the way that audiences interpreted the sequence as a whole. In one set of images, the shots of the man's face were joined together with a shot of a bowl of soup. When shown to an audience, they interpreted the images to communicate the idea of hunger, And, interestingly, they also interpreted the expression on the actor's face in the third shot to reflect a feeling of hunger. In another set of images, the shots of the man's face were joined together with a shot of a child in a coffin. When shown to the same audience, they interpreted the images to communicate the idea of grief. And, again, they also interpreted the expression on the actor's face in the third shot to reflect a feeling of grief. In yet another series of images, the shots of the man's face were joined together with a shot of a woman laying on a couch in a sexually suggestive pose. When shown to the audience, they interpreted the image to communicate the idea of lust. And once again, they also interpreted the expression on the actor's face in the third shot to reflect a feeling of sexual desire. In all of these sets of images, the shots of the man's face were the exact same shot, and yet audiences attributed very different meanings to that shot depending on the content of the shot that it was juxtaposed with. Moreover, they interpreted the expression on his face in equally different ways, even though his expression was identical and certainly did not change in any way in all of the different sets of images. From this, the filmmakers at the Kuleshov workshop identified what we might think of as the first principle of the Kuleshov effect. That is, that every shot in every film has two separate but interconnected meanings. One, the meaning of the shot in and of itself, and two, the meaning the shot acquires when juxtaposed or edited together with another shot. So, by itself, the shot of the man's face is just a shot of a man's face, and the shot of a bowl of soup is just a shot of a bowl of soup. But when edited together, those shots acquire an additional meaning, hunger, that neither one has independently, but that they gain when they are joined together. Because in that example, the meaning that the two shots acquire when edited together gives them the ability to communicate an abstract concept, hunger, that is acquired through the combination of their individual concrete meanings, a man's face and a bowl of soup. This experiment also established that movie editing could be used to establish symbolic relationships and to create symbolic associations between images. This ability to use editing to communicate implicit meaning is one of several ways in which editing is commonly used in movies. One of the other very common ways that editing is used to create implicit meaning in movies is through the use of editing to establish pacing when it comes to the movie's narrative. This is a technique known as rhythmic editing, where the pace of the editing either sets or reflects the pace of the plot action unfolding on screen in a particular scene, and, in the process, helps to set the tone for that scene. Scenes made up of shots with a short shot duration and frequent edits are used to create a fast-paced, chaotic, or frantic feel to the scene. Scenes made up of shots with longer shot durations and fewer edits are used to create a slow-paced, calm, or contemplative feel to the scene. In action movies and suspense thrillers, it is also very common for chase scenes, fights, or scenes where someone is in danger to gradually adjust the pace of the editing so that the shot duration incrementally gets shorter and the pace of the edits incrementally increases as the scene goes on, in order to create tension or to heighten suspense. These uses of editing to create implicit meaning are not the only uses of editing that derive from the Kuleshov effect. One of the other things that the first Kuleshov workshop experiment demonstrated was that when audiences used the second shot in the series of shots to interpret the expression on the man's face in the third shot, they were relying on the order in which those images were edited together to establish cause and effect. That is, they interpreted hunger in the man's expression based on the assumption that the first shot indicated that the man was either looking at or thinking about something. The second shot represented the thing that he was either looking at or thinking about, in this case the bowl of soup. And the third shot was a reaction shot that illustrated the man's response to the bowl of soup, so that the bowl of soup was interpreted to be the cause of the expression on his face. This illustrates one of the other common uses of movie editing, which is to aid in storytelling by establishing cause and effect in relation to the plot action that we see unfolding on screen. So, if you think back to the definition of moving narratives as a chain of events linked by cause and effect that occur in particular settings over a specific span of time, it might be helpful to think about editing as the thing that links that chain of events together on screen. Our next video will take a closer look at this use of editing to establish cause and effect.